Hello, my name is Greg Barnsdale. I'm an author from Ontario, Canada, and I published a book after working in the funeral and financial industry. The name of the book is Do Not Ignore Your Mortality: Practical Advice from a Funeral and Financial Insider. I inspire people to plan while they can.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another enlightening episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we've got a guest whose unique journey will not only inspire you, but also prompt you to reflect deeply on life's most profound certainties. Now, Greg, how are you doing, my man?
I'm great, Prosper. Thank you for your interest. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure is all mine. You know, when I saw your inquiry come through my desk, I was like, whoa, this is different. We've never really spoken about mortality and death in the way that we're going to be talking about today. So for those that are tuning in right now, thank you so much. You might be wondering, what is it that I'm talking about? So I want you to imagine dedicating your life to helping others maybe get prepared for the inevitable, only to find yourself getting face to face with your own mortality. Now, our guest today, Greg Barnsdale, is a seasoned undertaker, certified executive advisor, certified financial planner, and a hospice volunteer. And after years of advising others to get their financial and final affairs in order, and also him authoring an insightful book, Do Not Ignore Your Mortality, Greg was actually diagnosed with a significant brain tumor. So his personal encounter with mortality has now added a profound depth to his message. So today we're going to be going on a journey discovering who Greg is, what he does, and how he is helping others prepare for the inevitable. But also, it's not all death and gloom. This ends. I want you to know that apparently, despite having bound hundreds of other people during his career, Greg actually is afraid of giving blood. He faints when somebody sticks a needle inside of him. So it's just a reminder that even the experts have their own vulnerabilities. So as I mentioned, today we're going to dive into his work, his diverse clientele, and the methods that he employs to help others prepare for the inevitable, and how you can also be in touch with him or buy a copy of his book. Now, Greg, I could go on and talk about things, but as we all know, we don't have that much time in the world. Tell us a little bit about your journey, especially before you wrote the book, what you were doing and what sort of jobs you were involved in.
Well, again, I appreciate your interest in this whole story, Prosper. When I left high school, one of my teachers suggested, actually, a guidance counselor, that I consider becoming a funeral director. And I was actually considering being a helicopter pilot. But anyway, I ended up becoming a funeral director and went to college in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where I'm speaking to you from. And I worked in that industry and very much enjoyed it. I worked in the industry for about 12 years, and then I shifted gears and joined the financial planning industry. I'm still a funeral director today. I've held my license for 40 years, but as I worked in the financial planning industry, I noticed something very, very similar to what I had seen also in the funeral industry. And that was this general reluctance of people, a fair number of people, not wanting to discuss these sorts of things. And over the years, I found it very frustrating. And that's what pushed me to write and publish this book.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for, letting us know on that. Now, why would your teacher guide you towards funerals? Was there something that they had seen in your character, or was it something that you may have had some sort of positive inclination towards?
Well, I don't know, Prosper, what specific point it may have been. I've always been a quiet-natured type of fella, and out of that high school that I had went to, I think I was only the second or third student to pursue a career in the funeral industry. So I don't know what the answer is, but it was just a suggestion on her part. And I'm looking back, I'm glad she made the suggestion, because I have very much enjoyed working in the funeral industry, and I've gone back to it a time or two. At one point, I was a manager for one of the largest mortuaries in all of Canada.
Absolutely. And obviously, no regrets about not being a helicopter pilot?
Well, who knows where life would have taken me in that role. I feel very fortunate, Prosper, to be here where I am today, and have got over this brain tumor that I was diagnosed with shortly after publishing this book. But we never know whether we take a left turn in the vehicle or a right turn, whether it could end up in an accident or worse. Because no one can predict those sorts of things. But I'm a firm believer in just doing the best I can every day, and I'm so grateful that I'm still here now to be able to help people with this important planning.
Absolutely. I don't think you veered off that far from the thing that you actually wanted, because a helicopter pilot is somebody who maneuvers some sort of transportation for people going from A to B. All right. And in your role as a funeral director, you literally were also helping people transport from one place to another. I don't know if you've ever probably looked at it that way. You still are a pilot.
Yes. Well, it's a good point. A very good point, Prosper. But you know what one of the more interesting things is about what I have done is that over the last 20, 30 years, I have found more and more people getting behind this type of message. And I don't know if you've heard of the death positive movement, but when I joined the funeral industry back in the 80s, I was joining that movement, and I had no idea.
You see, death is one of those things that is inevitable, and so many people tend to be afraid of it, but we all know it's something that we're gonna experience. But the normal sort of modern day person might experience death 2 or 3 times in their entire lifetime, maybe from the parents' side or things of that nature. But this was something that was of a daily occurrence for you. What sort of human nature did you actually start noticing about people whenever they had to start facing their own mortality?
Well, I think we all have a certain vulnerability when it comes to this sort of thing, Prosper, because it's reality. We have to face it. And I have met people when I've worked in various funeral homes who were okay with it, in a sense, that the death of an older parent, as an example, or a grandparent who had lived a full life and died a natural death and had their affairs structured in such a way that it left the family in a position of strength. Those are all the positives that I have seen. But to be totally honest with you, the situations more so that we would see as funeral directors were situations where families were not prepared at all. They did not have the conversations, the documents, the will, the medical directives, and so on were not in place. And it often caused a lot of chaos and additional expense.
And you've obviously worked with people in a hospice sort of environment. Is there anything that people usually would have wished they had done before they got themselves to that position in life?
Yes, I've studied this a fair bit, Prosper. And one of a couple of the major things that most people are concerned about when it comes to the end of their life is that they don't want to, they're reluctant about the pain of dying, which I understand, but to a large degree, the medical community can very much control that. So the actual dying experience these days is really not that painful at all. It's quite pain-free from what I understand. although I've never experienced it, right? So I'm just going by what I've learned and heard from physicians and palliative care experts and so on. But one of the other big concerns that almost everyone has is they want to make sure that their family, those that they love, are going to be okay.
You've also embalmed people, and I'm just supposing if somebody has died peacefully, even their body says it all. Have you encountered some sort of awkward positions or things like that would have shown you that this death was not expected?
Well, yes, I have seen all kinds of things prosper, especially in the various roles that I've been in the mortuary funeral home side of things. And by the way, you're exactly right. I have embalmed hundreds of people who have died, and I am getting a little better at giving blood when I have to. By the way, it's not such a big fear of mine, but I don't mind seeing other people's blood, but I just really don't like seeing my own, I guess is really what it comes down to. But there's some vulnerability on my part, right, as you said earlier. But one of the more interesting situations that stands out in my mind from many years ago was that my coworker and I were called out to an apartment building where a woman had died. We met the police. The police took us up to the apartment where she was, and she had died standing up.
Mm. And did she just remain in that upright position, didn't fall or anything?
She did. Well, we learned that she had arthritis and her knees locked, and she was basically in the corner of her kitchen where two walls met, and her head was drooped, but she was basically propped up by the two walls in the corner, and that's where she was when we came to get her. And I have only seen that once and never seen it again.
Yeah, because the image that we have is, when life passes on, obviously there's no strength that keeps holding the body upright. But I can only imagine. Now, I've walked in my street during Halloween, and it haunts me for days, when I go into like a haunted house and there's pictures or just the sight of death around. Now, this was your job. Was there any times where you literally sometimes took work home or in your sleep?
Well, I probably at some point, Prosper, but I don't recall any specific situations where I felt uneasy. At one point, I lived above a funeral home, and many times I have slept in the funeral home when I would drive at quite a distance to get to work, over an hour. And if I was working late that particular day into the evening, and then I was due to come back in early in the morning, I would just stay overnight and basically sleep on a couch and bring a pillow and a change of clothes for the next day. And yes, it did certainly cross my mind that there were quite a number of dead people in the same building. But as someone had told me, it's not the dead you need to be worried about, it's the living.
Sometimes there's people that I've spoken to that have conversations with people that have just recently passed, and maybe these people are trying to tell them something, or there's instances where they feel like they've been shortchanged and they just really want to go back and fix things up. Has any of that sort of happened to yourself at all?
No, I don't recall any instances at all, Prosper, where I've felt that a decedent was trying to share some type of message with me or verbalizing anything. I have never sensed that at all.
But have you ever heard people mention things like that maybe it's happened within your industry and things of that nature? Yeah.
Well, I've heard of other, on television and so on, and in movies and such, but I have never heard of that with my colleagues that I have worked with. No.
Now, while you were obviously busy trying to figure out other people's, demise and lives, you also came face to face with your own diagnosis. Could you maybe walk us through what happened there?
Yes. After working in the funeral industry for over a decade and then shifting gears and working as a financial advisor, helping families out and then trying different things, trying to find the best way, Prosper, that I could share this message of preparedness with a large number of others, I then decided to write this book, and it took me literally years to put this together. I wanted to create a book that people would actually read, yet it was on a topic that most people didn't want to talk about. So I added some humor, and it's proven to be a good book because I got some good help to do it. But 2 months after I published the darn thing, I was diagnosed with a large brain tumor, and it all started with a ringing in my left ear.
You see, obviously, this would have given you a whole different perspective on mortality and the kind of work that you do. Maybe walk us through how this experience actually transformed your view.
Well, it was a huge relief, Prosper, knowing that I had my affairs in order. My will was in place. My medical directive, or here in Canada, as we call it, a power of attorney, I had in place as well. And my insurance was in place, my beneficiary designations. My wife knew exactly where the login credentials and everything else, the files and so on, where I keep them organized. That was a huge relief. And I have talked to so many people, Prosper, who have a major medical issue creep up in their life and then having to face it. Quite often, trying to get those things organized after the fact, when you've also got an illness to deal with, a serious illness, is very, very challenging. But I was lucky. I didn't have to. Mine was already in place.
But obviously, as a person and as a human, even though you've seen so many deaths and embalmed so many people, were you at least afraid that maybe this is going to happen to me now?
Yes, I was. Yes, as I said, I went to see my general physician because I had a sore neck, and I thought it was just from sitting at the computer so often and such. And he had said to me, Greg, don't worry about that. You've got a bigger issue. You've got a brain tumor. And he was looking at an MRI that had been provided back to him electronically. And he said, we're waiting for the ear, nose, and throat specialist to call us to set up an appointment. And he didn't know if it was cancerous or not. As I said earlier, it was non-cancerous, and I've been very, very, very lucky. But roughly within the hour, by the time I got home from his office, my cell phone went off, and it was actually the specialist secretary asking me to come in a couple of days later, right after the weekend. And I had assumed it was cancerous, and I didn't tell my wife for 3 days.
Wow. Were you trying to gather strength to come to terms with that, or you just didn't want to get her to think otherwise?
Well, I guess I was in shock looking back, Prosper, but this was on a Thursday morning and she was working from home, and I didn't want to ruin her day with my bad news, assuming it was cancerous. And then I didn't want to ruin her Friday, and then I didn't want to ruin her weekend. But Saturday morning, as we were sitting and having coffee, and Celine Dion's song, My Heart Will Go On, was playing in the background, tears started to come down my eyes. And she said, what's wrong? So I knew I had to tell her, because I had the appointment with the ear, nose, and throat specialist Monday morning, and she was devastated.
Absolutely. And I think that's the hardest part, when, you obviously are now in face-to-face or coming to terms with your own mortality. So throughout your book and your speaking engagement, what are some of the core messages that you aim to convey to your audience, so that they, like you say, put their affairs in order?
Well, I've boiled it down, actually, Prosper, to about 7 or 8 points, and this is what I'm stressing in all the interviews that I'm involved in now. But end-of-life planning helps reduce the stress of aging, which is a big issue on its own. It also tends to leave survivors more financially and emotionally resilient. They tend to be more likely to get along and less likely to contest final wishes. It naturally results in more meaningful legacies. The process often helps charities who desperately need the money. It takes immense pressure off the court system from otherwise having to deal with so many unorganized estates. And cumulatively, all these things help bolster the economy. It's a win-win for everyone. And I just wish more people, and I know it's difficult, but I wish more people would lean into this type of planning while minds are clear and time is plentiful.
I can only imagine. I think maybe it needs to be proposed in a different way, because I feel like if people are told they're leaving a legacy, all right, it takes away from the selfish, or I'm just doing it so that other people can enjoy what I created. And I feel like if there's a different way to really create it and put it across, but I think what is some of the responses that you're getting from people while you're having this kind of conversations with them?
Well, actually, the greatest traction, Prosper, that I'm seeing is through LinkedIn. I have a fairly compelling profile on LinkedIn with the various roles that I've worked at in both the funeral and the financial industry, and I guess people find that interesting. But I'm reaching out to people from the medical field, the legal, funeral industry, financial industry, and the end of life community, and the faith community too, with those core benefits that I had just mentioned to you about greater resiliency and leaving our loved ones in a position of strength, etc. And I now have well over 7,500 followers on LinkedIn, and many of them have provided me their email address saying, Greg, this is such a compelling message and it needs to be shared. But it's not new. These problems, Prosper, have been around for decades. I've just added my voice to the death positive movement, hoping to make a positive difference.
Here in Canada, they actually have like the government assisted, passing on. Is that part of what you're also helping people with, or what's the situation here?
Well, you're exactly right. It's called medical assistance in dying, and it became legal here in Canada back in 2016, and it's growing in popularity. But humans crave control, and unfortunately, in many parts of the world, people do not have control over that final last chapter of how they die. And the M.E.D.I.A program is really expanding a lot. And I listen to their webinars frequently, and I'm actually a technical writer for them as well. But it's very, very clear that the majority of Canadians absolutely agree, Prosper, that they want control over that final chapter of their life. And I don't get involved with M.E.D.I.A situations. My cousin died through the M.E.D.I.A program. He decided to end his life back in October. And I wrote about it, and it's been published with several different agencies, actually.
Many people just really avoid these end of life discussions. How are you encouraging individuals to overcome this reluctance? Because it's one of those things that not a lot of people would want to come to terms with their own, mortality. And yeah, because this is very essential in the way that we're moving towards the future.
Yes. There was an article that I wrote a few months ago, actually, Prosper, and it's about the hospital huddle. I don't know if you've heard of that, but the medical people often refer to the hospital huddle is when they see family members standing outside someone's hospital room and they're huddled around in a small group, and you can sense that they're worried and concerned and talking about topics regarding the person who's laying in the hospital bed in the room beside them, realizing that these conversations should have been discussed long before the health issue took place.
I mean, obviously, with what you're doing, you're dealing with people's lives here. You're dealing with people's families and, generations to come. And death actually has an impact, or it's the start or the end of somebody else's legacy or life. What has been the most rewarding outcome of your journey so far, and maybe how has it actually impacted your life and your work?
Well, I've had many people, Prosper, tell me that when I worked as a funeral director and also as a financial advisor, helping people get organized for this final chapter of their life in both those roles, I've had many people say to me after the fact, Greg, thank you for taking the time to do this. I've been wanting to do this for years, and I'm so grateful that I'm now organized. And I think that's those types of acknowledgments from people that I've helped in the past is some of the more significant memories that I have of helping people.
Absolutely. And for those that are inspired maybe by your story, and your book and things of that nature, what sort of steps would you recommend that they take in order for them to begin their own journey, first of all, in embracing mortality and maybe just planning for the future ahead?
Well, I have on my website a short quiz. It's a 5-question quiz, and it's called the Living Legacy Quiz. And I created this, Prosper, to help people realize if they have some homework to do. The percentage of people that I have found to be really organized in this way are very, very few. Most people have some loose ends that they could be tidying up, and many people have not done any planning at all because in quite a number of cases, they don't know where to start. I think my book is a good start. It's a conversation starter that really just educates people on the very fundamentals. And although it was written for the Canadian and the American market, I am seeing people in Australia and the UK buying it as well because the discussion within it is universal.
Absolutely. I know you help people prepare for their end and their mortality, but in the interest of keeping things at a lighter note, what's next? What are you excited about that you're going to be creating in the future?
Well, I don't know if I'll write another book, but what I want to do actually, Prosper, is share this message as wide as I can, and it is starting to get some good traction. As I said, LinkedIn is a wonderful tool, but I am finding from so many of these different related professions, even especially from the medical profession, there are so many people urging me to really share this message, and that's ultimately what I want to do, to inspire people to lean into this.
Absolutely. I think with what you're doing, this is quite needed. I mean, no one is ever prepared. And if you can maybe, I don't know, have you created some sort of a course or a community where people can go in, connect with all these experts that can help them, especially in and around their local areas or things of that nature? Is that something that is in the horizon, or you're already working on that?
Well, I haven't done that as of yet, Prosper, but I'm certainly open to doing something like that in the future. But one of the other things that I want to mention to you before I forget is that I have also created a fairly detailed list of questions that people can print off of my website free of charge with no obligation. But it's a curated list of 30 questions, 15 for initial icebreaker type conversations to get the conversations moving in the right direction, and then 15 questions to help in more advanced types of situations. But I find people are very much appreciating these types of questions to help them, because quite often they don't know how to get the conversations going or what to say.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, I can't thank you enough for the time that we've spent on the show today. I mean, your life story and your experience and what you're doing for others is definitely needed, because nobody's ever prepared for their own mortality. And so many of us would rather ignore it. And by the time it arrives, we are caught unawares, or our loved ones would not be as prepared for this. So thank you so much for the time that you spent with us on the call today.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Now, as we conclude this profound conversation with Greg, I actually encourage you to reflect on the insights that have been shared today. I mean, embracing your own mortality isn't about dwelling on the end, but it's about enriching our present and ensuring that we are actually leaving a meaningful legacy. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody who might find a benefit from this discussion. And especially when people just have started their family, it's usually the time to actually get started on the journey to embrace their own mortality. And while you're at it, if somebody has shared this with you, welcome to the Online Prosperity Show. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful content. Now, I want you to join us on our next episode where we're going to be exploring ideas to help you lead a happier and more fulfilling existence. And remember, planning for tomorrow empowers you to live fully today. Until next time, bye for now.